Somewhere right now, a dead man is still paying AOL every month. His computer is gone. The internet moved on decades ago, and the charge keeps clearing because AOL built a machine that was very, very good at one thing: never letting you leave. Here's what makes it almost unbelievable. This is the company that was the internet. The discs in every mailbox, the voice that said, "You've got mail." At its peak, more than 26 million people paid it every month. And when the world finally left dial-up behind, AOL didn't die gracefully. It figured out how to keep charging the people who thought they'd already quit for years. The real story isn't how AOL lost the internet. It's how AOL refused to let you leave. This isn't internet folklore. It's on the record. In the 2005 settlement with the New York Attorney General, in AOL Time Warner's own filings with the SEC, and in the $98.7 billion loss sitting on the company's books. We'll start with the trap, the machine that made leaving almost impossible. Then how they got you in the door. Then the act of hubris that exposed the whole thing. And then the cold turn when a dying company decided to milk the people it had already caught. Start at the end, because the end is the point. Years after Broadband 1, after the whole world had cable and Wi-Fi and phones in their pockets, millions of people were still sending AOL a check every single month. Some were still paying for dial-up, 56,000 bits per second, screeching modem dial-up in an age of streaming video. How does that happen? It doesn't happen by accident, it happens by design. In August of 2005, the state of New York forced the machine into the light. AOL paid $1.25 million to settle allegations from the New York Attorney General that its customer service reps were ignoring people who called to cancel, and the details are the part you don't forget. AOL had a team it called retention consultants. Their bonuses depended on you not leaving. If a consultant couldn't talk nearly half of the people who called to quit into staying, they lost the bonus. So the incentive was simple and it was ugly. Keep them on the hook, whatever it takes. And some agents found the shortcut. According to the settlement, when a customer service agent couldn't talk you out of it, some of them simply didn't process the cancellation. You called, you said the words, you hung up believing you were free, and the billing just continued. Members had a name for the whole experience long before the lawyers arrived. They called it AOL. And here's the thing, New York wasn't even first. AOL had already settled similar allegations with the Federal Trade Commission and with Ohio's Attorney General before New York ever showed up. This is why the stories sound the same everywhere you look. By some accounts, people spent the better part of a year fighting to cancel one account. Families cleaning out a relative's estate would find a bank statement with an AOL charge that had been quietly clearing for years, long after that person had stopped using a computer at all. The machine never learned to let go. So the question this whole video answers is, how did a company get so good at trapping people? And why did it need to? To understand the trap, you have to understand the bait. Because before AOL made leaving hard, it made joining irresistible. Through the 1990s, AOL ran one of the most relentless marketing campaigns in corporate history. Free trial discs, everywhere, in your mailbox, falling out of your magazines, bundled with cereal boxes and airline meals. By some accounts, at one point, half the compact discs being produced on the entire planet carried an AOL logo. And what they were selling wasn't really the internet. It was company, chat rooms, instant messages, that warm human voice, "You've got mail." For millions of people who'd never touched a computer, AOL was the online world. Friendly, simple, safe. In December of 1996, AOL made the move that turned it into a machine. It dropped hourly billing and went to a flat $19.95 a month, unlimited. The network nearly drowned in the flood of new users, busy signals for weeks. But the model was set. Discs in, subscribers up, one flat charge every month. Within a few years, 10 million people. At the peak, in 2002, 26.7 million. And with that many subscribers and a stock price that seemed to climb forever, AOL started to believe it could buy anything. It bought Netscape for $4.2 billion, MapQuest for $1.1 billion. And then, at the very top of the boom, it reached for something almost too big to imagine. In January of 2000, AOL announced it would merge with Time Warner, the movie studios, the magazines, the cable networks, CNN, the largest merger in American history. On paper, the deal was worth about $165 billion. And here's the trick that made it possible. It was almost entirely AOL stock. AOL was using its sky-high.com paper, a currency inflated by the bubble, to buy a real, solid, century-old empire of actual businesses. AOL's shareholders would end up owning 55% of the combined giant. It was orchestrated by two men, AOL's Steve Case and Time Warner's chief executive Jerry Levin, the man who agreed to hand over a real media empire in exchange for internet stock. And then, almost the instant the ink was drying, the bubble burst. Through 2000, AOL's stock, the entire currency of the deal, started to fall. The merger had been announced in January of 2000. It didn't finish closing until January of 2001. And in that single year of waiting, the value quietly bled out. By the time the deal actually closed, it was worth not $165 billion, but about $99 billion. Tens of billions of dollars gone before the merger was even complete. Now, in hindsight, critics called it exactly what it looked like, using funny money to buy the real thing at the worst possible moment. But be careful here. This is hindsight. Nobody has produced a boardroom admission that Case or Levin knew the stock was worthless when they signed. What we do know as fact came later. The company had to restate $190 million of improperly booked advertising revenue, and that restatement triggered investigations by the SEC and the Justice Department. The intent we can only argue about. The consequences were about to be undeniable, and no one lost more than Ted Turner. The founder of CNN, who'd sold Turner Broadcasting to Time Warner years earlier, became the merged company's largest individual shareholder. As the stock collapsed, falling around 70%, he watched the bulk of a multi-billion-dollar paper fortune simply evaporate. He would resign as vice chairman, the man who built CNN, undone by a merger built on melting stock. Then came the bill. In 2002, AOL Time Warner reported a net loss of $98.7 billion. Say that slowly, $98.7 billion. It was, and it remains, the largest annual loss in American corporate history. Most of it was a write-down, the company admitting in its own filings that the AOL Internet unit it had merged in was worth a fraction of what it had claimed. And here's the detail that sits in the primary source itself, almost too neat to be true. That 2002 loss, around $99 billion, was almost exactly the value of the deal that created the company when it closed. $99 billion to build it, $99 billion to write it off. The merger didn't just fail, it erased itself to the dollar. Steve Case resigned as chairman. Ted Turner walked out. The company would quietly drop AOL from its name. And now watch what a wounded company does. Broadband had arrived. The world was leaving dial-up behind, fast. A proud company might have let the old business die with dignity. AOL did the opposite. Exposed, humiliated, its stock in ruins, it turned inward and it milked. Because here was the secret. Even as subscribers left, the ones who stayed were incredibly profitable. In the mid-2000s, that obsolete dial-up access business was still throwing off billions of dollars a year. Money from a product the world had already left behind. And that is the machine we opened with. The retention consultants, the unprocessed cancellations, the gauntlet. It wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was the business model. The captive base was the last thing AOL had left that made money, so it built a wall to keep them in. So how long did it work? far longer than it had any right to. Subscribers had already fallen from that 26.7 million peak to around 20.8 million by 2005. And the machine fought every single exit. Years later, in 2015, AOL disclosed that around 2.1 million people were still paying for dial-up, about $20.83 a month, for 56K internet, a full decade into the broadband era. That same month, Verizon bought AOL for $4.4 billion, buying, among other things, that improbably durable stream of people who never left. And then, the number that lands the whole story. In 2021, decades after AOL's heyday, deep into the age of smartphones and streaming, around 1.5 million people were still paying AOL a monthly fee. Not for dial-up anymore. By then it was bundled as tech support and identity software. But the point stands. 1.5 million people, every month, still sending money to a company the world had stopped thinking about. The retention machine's inertia outlived AOL as a relevant company. It outlived dial-up. In the worst cases, it outlived the customer. And if you think this is just a nostalgia story, a weird footnote about your grandparents and a screeching modem, look at your own subscriptions. That free trial that's suddenly impossible to cancel, that "Are you sure you want to leave" screen, 6 clicks deep, the retention offer that appears the second you try to quit. AOL didn't invent human inertia, but it may have been the first company to industrialize it, to build a paid department whose entire job was to make leaving harder than staying. Regulators are still chasing that playbook today under names like Click to Cancel. AOL wrote it first. We open a file like this every week, a company that looked like a triumph and was quietly something colder. Subscribe, so the next one reaches you. Because AOL isn't the only giant that turned on the very people who made it. There's a company that ruled its market so completely it laughed out loud at the future, and then watched that future erase it in under 5 years. That story is on screen right now.